I was standing near the dessert table at my own wedding reception when I heard my aunt's voice rise above the soft background music, sharp enough to slice through the warmth of the evening. "Well," she said, not bothering to lower her voice, "at least Emma kept it simple. Not everyone can afford elegance." A second later, my cousin laughed, the sound light and careless, as if she'd just delivered a harmless joke. "Honestly, I'd be embarrassed to have my wedding in a backyard," she added, "but I guess when you're on a budget, you do what you can." I froze with my champagne glass halfway to my lips. My smile stayed in place, trained by years of politeness, but my chest tightened. Around me, fairy lights glowed softly in the trees. People laughed, hugged, danced. My wedding was unfolding exactly the way I had dreamed it would, warm, intimate, filled with love. And yet, in that moment, I felt suddenly exposed, reduced to a version of myself they had invented. My name is Emma. I was 26 years old that day, and I had just married the love of my life, Kyle. We stood in my parents' backyard, the place where I'd grown up, where I learned to ride a bike, where my dad taught me how to plant flowers, where my mom and I sat on the porch during long summer evenings talking about life. We invited 40 people, only those who truly mattered. String lights hung between old trees, wildflowers filled mason jars, long wooden tables held plates of food my mom had cooked herself, refusing any caterer because, as she said, food tastes better when it's made with love. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't trendy, but it was intentional, and to me, it was perfect. To my aunt and cousin, it was proof I hadn't succeeded. There had always been a quiet divide in my family. My aunt married into money early in life and never let anyone forget it. She lived in a large suburban house, drove luxury cars, vacationed abroad multiple times a year, and spoke about wealth the way other people spoke about weather, constantly and without shame. My parents were different. They were comfortable, stable, content. They valued peace over appearances, and for as long as I could remember, my aunt treated our side of the family like a charity case, never openly cruel, but always subtly superior. What she didn't know was that I had built a life far beyond her assumptions. I worked as a real estate investment analyst at a private equity firm. I spent my days evaluating high-end properties, structuring deals, and working on investments worth tens of millions of dollars. I was good at what I did. I had earned my position, but I never talked about money at family events. I didn't want relationships built on envy or comparison. I wanted to be valued as a person, not as a balance sheet. That's why Kyle and I chose a backyard wedding, not because we couldn't afford more, because we didn't want more. We wanted meaning. But my aunt and cousin saw it as confirmation that I was struggling. Later that evening, while refilling my glass, I heard them again near the flower arch. "Bless her heart," my aunt said loudly. "She really did the best she could with what she had." My cousin nodded. "When I get married, it'll be somewhere elegant. This is charming, I guess." I saw my mother walk past them. For a split second, her face fell. She didn't confront them. She just kept walking. That moment hurt more than anything they'd said to me directly. I approached them with a polite smile. My aunt turned, her expression coated in fake sweetness. "Every wedding is special," she said, "no matter the budget." My cousin jumped in, asking if Kyle and I had at least saved enough for a house, since renting must be so stressful these days. Conversations nearby quieted. Kyle squeezed my hand, silently reminding me I wasn't alone. I smiled through the rest of the night, but the words stayed with me. 2 weeks later, my mom called and hesitated before telling me my aunt was hosting a family brunch for established homeowners. I wasn't invited. A few months after that, at a holiday gathering, my cousin arrived engaged, flashing a massive ring. My aunt announced their luxury venue plans while glancing directly at me. Questions followed about whether Kyle and I were still renting. Offers of financial advice were made publicly. My parents sat in uncomfortable silence. Then came the call I had almost expected. My aunt asked if I could help my cousin find a rental before her wedding, not just listings, tours. "You're used to lower price points," she said casually. I agreed, even though every word stung. During the tours, my cousin treated me like an assistant, commenting on how small everything felt and asking if I ever felt cramped where I live. When I got home that evening, Kyle looked at me carefully. He said, "You seem lighter." I replied, "I'm done shrinking." What none of them knew, what I had intentionally kept private, was that Kyle and I had purchased our home 2 years before our wedding. Not a starter home, not a modest upgrade, a $5.5 million luxury waterfront estate in a gated community. 5 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen with a marble island, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, an infinity pool, a private dock, a custom home theater. I was a senior analyst earning 6 figures. Kyle was a tech executive. We bought the property quietly, off-market, and asked my parents to keep it private. I didn't want money to define our relationships. But money had already defined how they treated me. After overhearing one final conversation where my aunt expressed concern about my finances, I stopped hiding. I sent formal housewarming invitations to the family. I included the address. On the day of the party, I watched from the window as cars pulled up the long, private driveway. My aunt stepped out, staring at the house in disbelief. When I opened the door and welcomed them in, silence filled the space. "You live here?" she finally asked. "We've lived here for 2 years," I replied calmly. I gave them the tour. Room by room, reality settled in. When my aunt asked why I never mentioned it, I told her the truth. I valued privacy, and I didn't want money to define our relationship. "You assumed you were struggling," my cousin snapped. "I never said I was," I replied. "You assumed." There was no yelling, no revenge, just honesty. They left early. I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't reveal my home to prove my worth. I revealed it to stop hiding, and for the first time I understood something clearly. I never needed their approval, I just needed to stop waiting for it. After they left that night, the house felt strangely quiet, even though nothing around me had changed. The water outside still reflected the soft lights from the terrace. The air still smelt faintly of the food we'd prepared. Kyle wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. My parents stayed behind after everyone else left. My mom stood in the kitchen, running her hand slowly over the marble counter, still processing everything she'd seen. "I didn't know how big this place was," she said softly. My dad just looked at me for a long moment and then nodded. You never owed them anything. No explanations, no proof. Hearing that from him healed something deep inside me that I hadn't realized was still bruised. In the days that followed, the family dynamic shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. The group chat went quiet. My aunt stopped posting about investments and luxury plans for a while. When she did reach out, it was brief and carefully worded. No more advice, no more concern disguised as pity. My cousin unfollowed me on social media, and oddly enough, that felt like relief rather than loss. At the next family gathering, the air felt different. Conversations stayed polite but distant. My aunt no longer spoke over me or offered suggestions about my life. My cousin didn't brag about her wedding plans in my presence. For the first time, I wasn't being measured, evaluated, or categorized. I was simply there. What surprised me most wasn't their reaction, it's how little it mattered now. For years, I'd internalized their opinions without realizing it. I'd made myself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook, not because I lacked confidence, but because I didn't want to create tension. I thought silence was maturity. I thought humility meant invisibility. I was wrong. The house didn't change my worth. It never had. I was capable, successful, and grounded long before anyone stepped through those doors. But standing firm in my truth, without anger, without apology, changed something inside me. It freed me. Now, Kyle and I host dinners regularly, not extravagant ones, just meaningful evenings filled with people who celebrate us without comparison, people who never questioned our choices or tried to rank our lives. And every time I look around our table, I'm reminded that wealth isn't about square footage or price tags. It's about peace. It's about choosing authenticity over approval. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to your success. You don't have to explain your choices to people who never tried to understand you. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't proving them wrong, it's finally stopping yourself from believing them.